Welcome to The Focused View, the podcast for eye care professionals across Australia. Brought to you by Opticare. In each episode, we bring together leading eye care, optical and business professionals to share valuable insights, practical tips, and the latest trends shaping the optical business landscape. I'm your host, Michael Nasser, and together we'll explore innovative strategies for practice growth, patient care, and business success in the eye care industry. Whether you're starting your career, managing a practice, or just looking to stay ahead of the field, The Focused View is your source for inspiration and knowledge. In today's episode, we're excited to launch our new Through the Lens series, where we explore the personal and professional journeys of influential figures in the optical industry. Our first guest in this series is Paul Clarke, an optical dispenser and advisory board member of the ODA, who has made significant contributions to the field over his extensive career. Paul began his journey as an optical mechanic, a foundation that would serve him well as he co-founded Vision West, a pioneering optometry practice known for its exceptional service and commitment to quality. His technical skills and innovative approach were key to the early success of Vision West, setting a standard for others to follow. Beyond his professional achievements, Paul has been a passionate advocate for the optical profession. He played a crucial role in the deregulation movement of the mid-1990s and served as the first president of the Australasian Dispensing Opticians Association. His leadership extended to the international stage when he became the president of the International Opticians Association, broadening his impact and perspective on global optical practices. Paul's dedication to community service is equally remarkable. He founded Equal Health, an organisation that provides comprehensive health services to underserved communities. This initiative began with a focus on spectacles, but quickly grew to encompass a wide range of health services, making a profound difference in the lives of many. In recognition of this tireless effort, Paul was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in 2017. In today's Through the Lens conversation, we'll delve into Paul's early career, the evolution of Vision West, his political and professional advocacy, the inspiring story of Equal Health, and his insights on myopia management and future trends in the optical industry. We'll also discuss his current involvement with the Optical Dispensers Australia. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Now let's get started with our conversation with Paul Clarke and learn from his incredible journey in the optical industry. Welcome to the show today, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to get into today's questions and learning more about yourself and your career. So to get us going and for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your early career, and how you got started in the optical industry?
Okay, well, after I finished school, I was looking for an apprenticeship in something that was technical. My greatest hobby was electronics, which I'd really played with since I was very young. And that was the area which I thought I'd head. My mum didn't think that sounded so good. I don't know what she had against electronic stuff, but she found optical mechanics and that was appealing and that looked well to me. So I went for an interview at OPSM and got the job and the apprenticeship. And that was in the mid-70s.
So is it something that you always had on your mind from the beginning, or once your mum sort of exposed it to you, like, yeah, this is for me? And did you see that correlation with electronics, or how did you make that connection to sort of say, this is something that I could see myself doing?
Well, it was something that I could use some hand skills in, which was really what I was looking for. And I think my mum was also very much aware of that at the time as well. She just thought maybe it sounded a bit posher being an optical mechanic than an electronics technician. So. And it was also, just the fact that it was in the health industry and that it was doing something, I guess, worthwhile. It was something that wasn't common. I never heard of an optical mechanic prior to that. And also when I went in for the interview and I saw the equipment and what I'd be doing, that was also quite appealing.
And I guess for the benefit of our listeners, I mean, optical mechanic is not a term that's really used nowadays. You mentioned this was in the mid-70s, and I know OPSM was a massive vehicle for getting people into the role of optical mechanic, or what we, I guess, refer to more broadly today as an optical dispenser. But can you explain a little bit about what an optical mechanic was and the difference between that and, say, a dispenser?
Well, In those days, an OPSM was, I guess, a different OPSM to what it is now. It was a large optical company, and it wasn't part of a conglomerate. So most specs were made in Australia, and they were made, in fact, all glasses are really made in Australia, and they're made in an optical lab that did everything from the beginning to the end. And so the role of an optical mechanic was to work in an optical lab mostly. Some would work for private optometrists, but you'd be in a lab and you'd be grinding the lenses and fitting lenses to the frames and all the other things that go in just repairing a pair of glasses, like repairs, etc. So the task was to just manufacture a heap of glasses. You'd have optical dispensers in the retail outlets, and then we would do the rest in the lab. So it was a very hands-on skill. Nowadays, the physicists and electronic engineers now sort of produce equipment that does most of that work for you. So the role is not all that necessary. Optical dispensing was fairly new, as far as a course at least, when I was in that. And that was the next progression, which I did. But the first part of it was that 4-year apprenticeship, and that was very much a hands-on thing. It was, you did all the calculations and you really had a good idea of what you're doing, I guess, because you're just playing with the lenses, looking at the lenses. And that was a very big part of, the industry in those days.
Yeah, and I guess probably it's good to know that when we go to talk about, I guess, how your career progressed and things that you've done, because that, I guess, that grounding in the technicality of the product is something that you probably used and relied on throughout the rest of your career.
Absolutely.
And so I guess, understanding that story, an area that I wanted to address and to get to know a little bit more is about Vision West. And obviously Vision West is a business that, you had a big part to play with. And I guess, how did Vision West begin and how did it evolve?
Well, I was working for an optometrist once I left OPSM in a private practice in Adelaide. And I was there for a little while. He actually sold the business and me with it to a larger group. But shortly after that, I went to live in North Queensland for 18 months. And then that same optometrist that I was employed with in Adelaide called me up from Perth. And he said, I've moved to Perth. And it was about the time of the America's Cup. Everything was happening in Perth. And he said, I've just joined this group and I'd like you to come over here and work. And I said, well, I'm having a bit too much fun up here. And he said, how much are you earning? And I said, well, that's not relevant. He said, because I like to offer you this much. And I said, what time do you want me?
Right.
So that was where it just began. So ultimately, this optometrist, Grant Nicholas, didn't hang around and do what he was going to do with this other little group. He opened up his own place. And so the two of us pioneered that. 6 years later, with an optometrist that had joined the practice since, called Craig Butler, I bought the practice, and Craig and I ran that for about 9 years or 10 years till I bought Craig out because he went back to the University of New South Wales to work in optics there. And then from there, some years later, I took on another partner, and Vision West sort of grew that way. We changed the name to Vision West once Craig and I bought it, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, really. It was a great practice.
Yeah, and that leads into the next question that I have, because as you mentioned, Vision West is based in Perth, and once it started, it continued to grow and grow and grow. And I guess what were some of the key elements that enabled the practice to grow and have those early years of success?
Well, Craig brought with him some very nice skills, and he was a behavioural optometrist, and he had a whole bunch of other ideas that I'd never even heard of in optics. And we implemented those, and we loved doing that work together. And so we just attracted, I guess, an audience of people that supported Vision West very well. And that didn't stop growing right up until the time I left, really. So we started with one room, and more recently, when I retired, there's 4 rooms running full time, and we've booked out usually months in advance on all of the rooms. And with that, we're not doing any bulk billing, we're not doing any health fund deals or anything like that. It's just pure optics, and it's been great.
And is that something you did from the outset? Something we speak about on the podcast, and I do from time to time, is understanding your why or knowing your point of difference. And it seems like that was pretty clear early on for you. And would you say that, I guess, that was something you had from day one, and were you clear on that? And what made you different, I guess, to other practices, or how did you see yourself as being different, to other practices, when you launched and when you sort of embarked on that journey?
I think we had lots of points of difference. One was everything was in-house. So this comes back to being an optical mechanic, I suppose. We've always manufactured the glasses in-house as far as fitting lenses, and that's any complex fitting as well, rimless, etc., and repairs. So we could offer a very quick service to people. And we got to the point where we said, I don't think that the model that is there now is the way we started or the way that we intended it to be. When you first start a business, you really want anyone to come into your practice to keep the turnover, to pay the rent, to pay the wages, etc. Ultimately, we realised that we could get the people and just practice the way that we wanted to do and still be busy. In fact, I would say that made us a bit busier, because we had a point of difference on what we did. We weren't afraid to sell expensive stuff. We didn't find the need to bulk bill ultimately. And I think people really appreciate that there are businesses like that. Not everyone wants to come to that sort of business, and some people feel better and safer going to a place that offers great deals and great prices and things like that. But there is a huge cohort of people out there that look for a business that just gives really good quality and good service as well.
Yeah, I think that a few of the optometrists and people that I've spoken to through the podcast and just through my journey, if you're really clear on that mindset of what you want your practice to look like and how you want it to be, if it comes to things like bulk billing and offering those deals, it then resonates through your practice, and then you attract the customer that you ideally want. And if you have certainty in that, I feel like, there's a good fluidity there, and you find that, individual that really wants and appreciates your service. And when you can do that, I think that's when you probably get a little more fulfillment in terms of what you're offering and what you're doing. And it sort of just is a bit of a snowball, I feel.
Look, I absolutely agree. And, when I said that there are people that don't necessarily want to come to our sort of service, we don't need to feel bad about that, because there are multiple practices out there that offer the other side of the service. We're 2 pairs for price of 1 and things like that. So,
and you mentioned the importance of the optical mechanic skills that you'd built out early on, and obviously that you carried through Vision West. Did you feel like that helped the reputation? And if so, I guess what other benefits did you see in the practice?
Look, I absolutely think it does. I like lenses, I like optics, and we've had many staff that we've put through the optical dispensing course in that time, and I've pushed the need for them to be hand skilled up and to understand lenses. Even after doing the course can only really, for the amount of time it takes to become an optical dispenser and the amount of time that they can sit in the classes, there's only X amount of knowledge that they're able to get. So to be able to use the old skills and just teach them, for example, looking at a lens and understanding the way it looks, or just looking at a patient coming in with a pair of glasses and thinking, okay, this person is short-sighted, long-sighted, there's a lot of astigmatism I can see. You can even look and think, okay, so their axis is around 180, and have all of that information way before the person says anything is a really handy skill to have. To be able to pick up a pair of glasses and look at them, look through them, push them around and just see what's happening, you're already on the front foot when it comes to just helping that person. A lot of our staff have been mostly challenged when it comes to Prism, which it still bothers a lot of people, and we did a lot of Prism work. But to get the message across that Prism exists in glasses, that's what glasses are. Lenses are prisms. They're 2 prisms, and to just embrace it and to love it. It's not something different. Also, just looking at the lens materials, the coatings, having all that information just right there before you start. And there's been many a funny story when it's come to that as well. For example, a story would be, we did a lot of dyed masks. We'd do about 3 or 4 dyed masks a week, and we were known for that. And there was a lab in Adelaide that just produced some great glass lenses still that we were using. But even more recently, in the last 12 months, a person came into Vision West after a number of emails, and then finally came in because he lived a fair way from where our practice was. And he had minus 550 sills in each eye, and he just questioned whether or not we could actually do the full script. Whether that was there in the emails, he kept saying, yes, absolutely, that's not a problem. He eventually came in with his partner, who both got some dyed masks, and he handed me the script. And I said, look, this isn't an issue. And he said, you're absolutely sure you can do it exactly like my glasses? And I said, I promise I can. He said, because I've done all my research and I can get them interstate, and I can do this, but it's always going to be to stay less the script because I can't get my whole script. And I said, look, no, it's going to work, I promise. And I think he doubted right at the time he came to pick the glasses up. Now, when you're doing a mask and getting those axes dead right, when you're gluing lenses to another piece of glass, you really want to try to get that axis spot on. It doesn't always quite happen, and it doesn't matter so much. But on a 550 sill, it's just vital. And this was one of those ones where it was dead on both. He brought the script in from another place as well. So there's always that risk, is that script right? But he was wearing them with a pair of glasses. When he picked the mask up, he put them on, he looked out the window, and he took the mask off immediately, put his old glasses back on, took them off, put the mask on again. So I said to him, listen, it's going to feel weird because it sits differently. You haven't got the wrap. You haven't got the angle on your pair of glasses. It's going to be strange. He said, no, it isn't that. Why do I see better out of the mask than out of my glasses? So we had a look at his glasses, and one lens was 6 degrees off axis and one 4 degrees off axis. I couldn't really do much swinging on to help. But I said, look, all you can do is take this mask into the place that you got, and said, I can see well with this, I can't with your glasses. And I think this is the reason why. I said, I'm sure they're going to be accommodating with that. So those sorts of skills, I think, help to build the practice. Now, he is going to probably be a client of Vision West forever, I would think.
Absolutely. And I could totally see why, because if I was that customer and I had that experience, it just speaks to the skill and to the technicality understanding of the product. And it comes out in your voice by confidence because you know what you're doing. And I think when you have that confidence within yourself to know what you're offering and know what your capabilities are, and that translates to the customers. And then furthermore, you prove it by producing a great product. It's like, well, there's not much more that needs to be done in that regard. And like you said, I can totally understand why they'd be a client for life, because that's an awesome example. I want to spend some time talking about other areas of your career because, you've obviously, been a big part of Vision West, and you've set that up, and it's a great business. But there are other parts that you've evolved, in your time in optics, and I did want to touch on those. And I guess we'll start with your involvement with the former ADOA and IOA, and what motivated your involvement, especially. And this is something that I learned when I spoke to you. I wasn't aware of it, about deregulation. Obviously, in the context of my career, deregulation came around 2009, 2010. But when I spoke to you, like, well, hold on, I got involved, in the mid-90s with deregulation. So can you speak to that and what motivated your involvement in the deregulation movement in the mid-90s?
Sure. Look, there was back in those days, it really went back to the Hawke government, where he made a promise to New Zealand that they would establish what was called Trans-Tasman mutual recognition, which means that regulated people for various occupations, but mostly in health, could then travel between New Zealand and Australia. And so they would put everything in place to make sure that the regulations in both countries were just going to be recognised. What he didn't consider at the time that he said that was okay for New Zealand, but in Australia we've got a federation, and there were different states had different regulations, and so all of that regulation first of all had to become equalised in all of the states. And so they formed a working group of health ministers from around Australia called the RMAC group, and they were there to look at regulation. And then there was also organisations or businesses like optical dispensing, occupations like optical dispensing, which were just partially regulated. So really the only places that were regulated was New South Wales, which was well established, South Australia, and Western Australia, which had a lesser form of licensing. But the rest of the states didn't have licensing for optical dispensers. And in actual fact, the Act sort of read that if you weren't an optometrist, you couldn't really dispense glasses. So
right.
But all of that was quite wild around the place. And really after a very long period of time and changes of governments and new health ministers coming into the group, ultimately it was the public servants that crossed off our occupation as there been a need to be regulated. At the time we were fighting for it, and we were really pushing for greater regulation, but we had to prove that there was a serious risk of injury or death if a person went into an optical dispenser and didn't see someone that was registered. And that was a very hard thing to do. And the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. You were also the first president of the ODOA. Can you talk to us about that role and what that entailed in the early days?
Yeah, so what happened was that one of the odd affairs probably would have been about very early 90s, I think, about 92, 93. There's a person called John Jackson who was like the godfather of optical dispensers in Sydney. And we really called for a group meeting of all the groups saying, let's just form a national thing so it could work like in those days the AOA, which had the national organisation and it had the state chapters, and it said, that's maybe going to bring the whole team together and we can get working on it. And this was before deregulation, but we thought it might help regulation, and so that was the whole reason for forming that, and that worked very, very well. In fact, it was called the Australasian Dispensing Opticians Association because the New Zealanders were on board as well in those days, and those are fairly exciting times. And for a number of years, the organisation was working quite well. As far as being the first, that wasn't the intention. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did.
Yeah.
So it was good.
And you also served as a president for the International Opticians Association. Can you speak more about that organisation and I guess how that played a role in optics at that particular time?
Well, again, referring back to John Jackson, the Godfather, who was an incredible man and a good man. At times, I think he thought he was my dad as well. But he said to me that if you're involved this heavily in optics, you need to join this organisation called the International Opticians Association. And that was formed about 60 years earlier at that stage. And it was really formed between some groups which are in the UK, the United States and Australia. And the members were those three countries plus New Zealand, South Africa, Ireland, and a couple of others. They would meet every 2 years somewhere in the world, mostly in the host countries. And they would just talk optics. And you said you have to be in this organisation. If you're the president of the ADOA, you have to come and join this organisation. And when John Jackson said that, you would do that because you're a bit scared of him as well. And in those days, it was more like a nomination, so someone would invite someone to come in. And I went to the first one in St. Louis in America, and I was just blown away by it. I just thought, this is just fantastic. I never want to miss another one of these again. And I didn't up until COVID. So it was just a great organisation. In that organisation, I think one of the best parts about it, and John Jackson said to me, one of the great parts is it's great going to the conferences, listening to the speakers, but where you get the most out of it is when you're sitting having a dinner or a beer with the other people and just chatting about what you do. And I took many of those skills back to our business at the time that were just fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Can you talk to some of those skills and I guess, how that role impacted your perspective on the optical profession at large?
Well, I think more than anything, it just kept us ahead of the game. Having those different countries, everything seemed to happen in other countries a little bit before us. And so we were all envious of New Zealand. They didn't have any bad influences out, but we could feel the 2-for-1 offers and we could feel the health fund invasions coming in and, between us and customers. And we could see that transition, so we were well armed to just get ahead of doing that. There are also just ideas about how people did stuff. I think if I'm thinking about some of the skilled stuff that we did, there's a great deal of talk about the fact that there's less skill involved now as far as who's employed. I always felt it was important for us to have qualified people, so we always made sure that our optical dispensers went through the course. If a person came to join us and they weren't qualified, they would be qualified. If they'd had optical experience and they joined us, we'd also put them through the course and just saw the importance of that. And I think we learnt that from the Americans more than anything else.
I can totally see how that relates as well. Moving on, and I guess what I sort of see is one of many great achievements that you've been able to do over your career, equal health and your charitable work. And I'd really like to get to know more about that and have our audience and listeners learn more about it as well. Can you tell us about the founding of Equal Health and its mission?
Well, Equal Health was another one of those things that just happened, really. And it all started when one of our frame reps came in and said that she'd met this man that's involved with this mission in India, and he took some second-hand glasses with him, and they were a big hit. And she said, could you ask the members of the Western Australian Association if they would keep any old glasses so she can give them to this guy? Now, coincidentally, just beforehand, I've been talking to David Wilson, who's another classic person from this industry.
He wrote a book, didn't he? He wrote one of the dispensing books that they were using.
Yeah, the Practical Optical Dispensing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wrote some articles on the fact of it's a false economy to have second-hand glasses sent to third world countries. And I didn't disagree with him.
Yeah.
So I passed on my expression to her. I said, look, I think it's a false economy. Probably shouldn't have said that. It wasn't the right thing to say, I suppose. But I said, I think it's a false economy. I said, there's a much better way to do it. I said, there is a waste every year on this product. It's a fashion product, and it means that there'll be X amount that's going to go in the bin every single year. I said, as an industry, we could do better by just finding ways of producing matching spherical lenses with no scratches, with things that are more relevant, without lots of sill and no bifocals, and a frame that's not going to break 5 minutes after the person puts them on because they're old. And I said, I think that would be a better way of doing it. So she walked out of the place quite sad that I wasn't actually all that helpful. And next thing, this guy called John Timms that had this mission over there came into Vision West and said, so what are you going to do for us? I'm there, well, nothing. I was just expressing this. He said, it'd be great if you could do something. And I said, well, no, I was just sort of saying,
Wow.
Anyway, so when he left, I thought about it. And then I thought maybe we could. So I asked some members of the West Australian Association. In those days, lots of people had etching machines, and they just put their hands up. Yeah, he said, I'll do 100, I'll do 20, I'll do something like that. And the industry kindly did help us out, and that's including your dad.
Yep.
And in a very big way. And so these products came in, and the members made the glasses. And I think we had, actually, I was even worse than that, because I was about to go away, and I was going on holidays for a time, and I put someone else in charge of it. And so it was all done when I wasn't there, which is even worse. I handed these glasses to this guy, John Timms, and he said, look, he said, to be silly. He said, you've got to come with us and help us to do this. And I said, no, I can't. I've had too much time off this year. And I guess I came off the back of having a divorce that year as well, which didn't really help. Your mind's always in a different place, as it always is. And so I said, I just can't do that. But he was quite persuasive. In fact, what he did was he said, I've actually bought you the ticket. I said, you can't do that.
Not much option.
Why would you do that? And he said, oh, God told me to. And I said, look, I don't think along those lines. It's not. He said, it doesn't matter. So in the end, I thought, all right, I'll come. And so he handed me the tickets, and he told me how much the ticket was going to cost me. And I thought, man, I've been really sucked in here. But the rest was history. The impact of going to a totally isolated place in the middle of Tamil Nadu in India and just seeing the need was just incredible. In fact, I had to deal with that just mentally, how that works. And then next year, I took a whole bunch of people, and that included your dad.
Yeah.
And then the rest just grew. It grew from there.
Yeah. And I actually remember Dad going. I remember him mentioning he's going to India, and I remember that quite vividly in terms of, what he was doing. So it's it's interesting for me to talk about it now as well from that different point of view, from the person who organised it. But can you share some memorable experiences from that charitable work? And you mentioned there your first experience, and maybe can you speak a bit more to that, because for a lot of us, we don't see this type of thing, and I can only imagine how how much of an impact it left on you. So I guess an memorable experience, but also that first experience too, assuming it was memorable.
Oh, absolutely, it was memorable. I think for most people that we took over the years, it was memorable. One of my most vivid memories, there was always some great stuff. We saw a lot of aphakic people, which I didn't have glasses for at that stage. The next year we took some, plus 10s, 11s and 12s. And these are people that just didn't have glasses at all. They've been going, for years without having any glasses. And so that was a great part of it. But there were many good optical moments, which were just fantastic. Getting off the optical side of it, it was also, we're staying in the villages and we're sleeping on the ground on these mats. And, the first day out working, it takes it on a totally different level, but I just felt the urge to go to the toilet. So I said to this guy, John Timms, I said, where's the toilet? And he said, I'd just go out in the bush there somewhere. And I said, well,
oh, no.
I'm talking about a more serious visit to a toilet. Right. And he said, can't you wait till we get back to our little place? And I said, well, I've been to India before, and the urge is there. It's best to follow it through. And he goes,
can't ignore it.
And he thought about it for a minute. So I got one of his village helpers there, and he told him what I needed. And he looked at me, and he looked a little bit surprised. And I'm thinking, why is this such a big deal? Where's the toilet? John saying, there are no toilets here. And how can there be no toilets? He said, people just go out to the bush. It's a morning ritual.
Wow.
No, seriously? So this guy got me to sit on the back of his push bike as he rode me down this little dirt track, and he pointed in a field. And they're, oh, okay.
That was it.
So I walked down the field in this tall grass, and all these herds of people followed, and they just stood there watching. That was an urge that disappeared and never came back. So there's a memorable moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to speak to the makeup of it. So you would take, and I know that it expanded to other health services, and I definitely want to touch on those. But if we focus on the optical side, you took optometrists and dispensers and mechanics and you took lenses and equipment over, or how did the mechanics of it work? And what was that actual, service that you were providing to the locals there in India?
Okay, so the actual glasses were manufactured here before we left, and we set up an agreement with Casuarina Prison here in Perth, which is a maximum security prison, and we put some equipment in, and also just train the guys. So ultimately, they were doing 5,000 pairs of glasses for us a year. Virtually all of those frames would come from industry, and we'd buy the lenses in, and so we'd worked out over the time exactly the sort of powers that we'd really need. So the people would line up, and there'd be big crowds of people every single day. And they would line up, and we'd do visual acuities outside, which was putting a electric E-chart on a wall on the tree, and that would also act as just also controlling the crowds, keeping them away from the main area that we did the testing. Then they were ushered in, so the locals would do that sort of work. They would see the optometrist that would do retinoscopy on them and work out the best average sphere that's going to help them, either for distance or reading, or both. And then they come into the optical dispenser that would choose the right frame and do the adjustment there and explain through the interpreters how it's going to work and what they need to do. We would do, on any one day, one little group of one optical dispenser and one optometrist could see up to 70 or 80 or maybe 100 people. It was a very fast mission. We also had cataracts were a major issue, and we'd build up a friendship with an eye hospital out of town, and we would send people there for cataract surgery. We could actually send hundreds, but it was very hard to get people there sometimes because people were a bit scared of the consequences. But we ultimately took ophthalmologists with us as well, and they were working in those hospitals with the ophthalmologist helping out as well.
Such a great activity and such a great cause. I mentioned earlier that it did expand to include more comprehensive health services. Can you speak to what it expanded to be? And as far as I know, it's still operating today, if I'm not mistaken, and I guess what that looks like today. And
it is. Yeah, so a very close friend of mine had been watching. He was a dentist, and he was just watching what was happening, and I had suggested to him that maybe we could do a dental side, which he said that's impossible. It's easy with the glasses. But as the years progressed, a couple of years progressed, it all seemed like it might be possible. And it was. And there was a lot of portable equipment that we could take. So we're also taking GPs because they were doing all the vital tests necessary before sending patients off to have cataract surgery. But their role expanded a little bit. And it wasn't a great deal they could do apart from referring people to the eye hospitals when they came in, or to just the general hospital if they needed other health checks. But we ultimately had optical, dental, and medical. And then we introduced allied health, and that's because we'd expanded to other areas and we had other partners. And so these people were occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech pathologists, and they were working with organisations, training the workers there to work in these lay organisations. It's a little bit like Australia. You can't get those sort of health professions to go to the country areas, and so there was no service there whatsoever. And ultimately, we had relationships with two great organisations in India. The original contact that took me to India had ceased quite a bit earlier, but these organisations were government-sponsored organisations in India, and they were using our skills. So our workers were well informed to go there humbly just to do the work, mostly helping the local people and just training them to do the work they do. That work is still ongoing, and Equal Health is quite a strong, financially well-secured organisation now. I was involved for 24 years. In that time, we took 1,074 people from Australia over to India, and also South Africa and Thailand, and we did some work in Indonesia and Zimbabwe as well.
Well, like I've mentioned, it's an amazing cause and fantastic work, and it's a real testament to yourself to be able to have pioneered that and really understood the needs and met those needs. And you were awarded the Medal of Order of Australia, an OAM, in 2017, which is absolutely phenomenal. And congratulations on that. Can you share what this recognition meant to you?
Well, it came as a surprise. I guess what it meant more than anything else was I don't know that you necessarily feel you're worthy of it. It wasn't why I did it. It wasn't at all on the thing. The only thing was at that time in 2017, that was about the time I thought, because Equal Health consumed as much time as Vision West did in any 1 week.
Yeah.
And I thought it's time for me to move on from this now. But And that was about 2017, and the award came in 2017. So I thought, I can't leave right now. It looked like I've taken the trophy and sort of moved on.
Right.
But look, it is really, really special. It was just about probably one of the nicest things. I mean, I don't really do anything with it. It's just there, but it's just really nice that people would think that I was worthy of that. So it's great.
I mean, the recognition is amazing and very well deserved. So congratulations again on that. The next area I want to speak about, and again, it sort of seems like that was so big, and it's like, moving on to this next item, because I could talk about equal health for a lot longer. I feel there's a lot more that we could explore there. Is myopia management, and you'd alluded to early on when you started with Vision West, the initial optom that you had there when you purchased it was a behavioural optometrist, and I'm not sure how common behavioural optometry was back then as a term, as a concept. I'm not understanding the history of it in that regard, but you've been involved with children, and children's vision since the early 90s. How has this area of practice evolved, and where do you see its future? Because, obviously it is trending again at the moment, and it's definitely something that's in the fore of a lot of our minds in the industry. So how do you see that?
Well, I guess behavioural optometry is on a bit of a scale. There are some places that work what I would call extreme when it comes to the behavioural optometry, and some just dabble in a little bit. Somewhere in the mix there, I think, is my opinion, is where it sits, and it works quite well. Craig Butler had a huge imagination, and he was way ahead of the rest. He also liked to do everything that was a bit different, not just necessarily kids' vision, but he was also interested in orthokeratology in those days, and we were the first ortho-K practice in Perth. Now, ortho-K is actually used in myopia management as well.
Mm-hmm.
But all lenses would be looking at trying to slow down the progression of myopia in kids. And anecdotally, we saw the results all the time, because you'd see siblings where the parents are both like -4 or thereabouts, and you see the children when they reach their teens that myopia creeps up. And then, because of the many years that we were there, you'd saw the second sibling that just didn't happen, and it was just happened too often not to think, okay, this is on the right track. Now it's accepted that you do that, and there's some wonderful myopia-controlled lenses. But yeah, it was certainly always part of the practice.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to the optical profession now regarding, staying current with this industry trend, and I guess any industry trend? Because I'm sure in your experience and in your years, in optics, you would have seen a whole heap of, different, I guess, moments when things were highlighted more than others. What advice would you give to the optical profession in that regard with staying current?
Look, I think that's happening anyway. There was a time when there were people that would knock our sort of optometry. I certainly never felt that. I thought it was a very good part. It also built loyalty. In fact, having kids vision is a great niche to have. It's a lot of hard work, because kids are really tough on their glasses, and you just have to be prepared to have people buying a pair of glasses one day and coming the next, and they're snapped in two, and how you deal with that and things like that, which happens less with adults. But in that time, we worked out that kids vision, we were seeing now many of the kids that we used to see. Facebook has been just fantastic for Vision West. We do have a Facebook site, but not that we were using it so much. We didn't use it all that much to promote, but the mothers of the kids did. So
mothers groups.
The mothers groups and those groups, they would say, where do I go to get my kids' eyes tested? And it always come up Vision West, Vision West. So having any sort of niche is quite good that way. I think just embracing and look at the stuff, and even though it is more difficult sometimes to do kids' vision, and you have to have a good range, and you have to be prepared to. There was one little paper that was out, how to treat the parents of the kids that you see, things like that. So it is a hard gig, but I would recommend everyone to keep up. There's a lot of competition out there, and if you're in an independent situation, you need to have something other than the things that the corporates can do very, very well. And the corporates do it very, very well. So just trying to compete with the corporate, you may not quite get the results you want. So if you can have something different, just look out there, look at what the industry can offer that might be considered a higher class of optics.
Yeah. I think creating that point of difference, you're finding your purpose, finding that niche, I think is critical for independence. And it's a testament to what you've done as well, because obviously you've been able to do that and harness that and then build a fantastic business as a result of that. Another way that people can do it, and obviously something that we've explored here on the podcast, is the ODA, the Optical Dispensers Australia group, which you're very much a part of. And what I'd like to do is speak a little bit more about your current involvement with the ODA and I guess how you see that and its influence on the profession.
Oh, look, I just love the ODA to death. I just think it's everything that we ever tried to be, and the foresight of James and Chetty from ACOD to actually underwrite it, and then finding April was just the biggest find in the whole world. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. It is such a professional organisation. It's doing everything that we could ever hope for. I think that every other country around the world with their association, if they could look at, how ODA is working, to be very, very jealous. It's a great scheme. So my role on it is purely just sitting on the advisory board for as long as they want me to give advice. Hopefully that's helpful. It is just everything that we could ever have hoped for. Just the fact that they have established a way to keep ongoing education very much at the forefront. I think there's over 2,000 members now on their books, and that's just amazing. And the fact that we can have events, and it can be a black tie event, and you still pull a crowd, or 200 and something people turning up for the graduation in New South Wales each time it's there. It's just a testament to that whole organisation. Is just fantastic.
Yeah, they've definitely hit the nail on the head with creating an entity that I think represents dispensers, for the educational side of things, but also just to create that network and community. Because I feel, we as an industry are quite small, and it's very relatable amongst Australians. So when you can create an organisation that allows you to network and be connected, and obviously learn and advance your career and advance, what's possible as a dispenser, and what they've been able to do in harnessing the industry and promoting it. I think April's doing an amazing job, and she obviously was on a recent episode as well, and speaking about CPD in particular and how that all works. So full credit to all of them. I think they're doing great things at the ODA and ACOD for that matter. As we sort of draw to the end, and in reflection on your career, what are you most proud about when you sort of look back on it all now?
I haven't totally left the industry.
No,
so there's still stuff to do.
Yeah, to date.
I think that we serve the public really, really well. I think that if you're looking at a industry as a collective, as a group, you would really hope that as a, and especially working in health, that you can just provide something very useful and helpful to the general public. And I believe that our business did, and I believe that many businesses do. I think there's a place for everything that exists in the business, the corporate organisations, the independents, the people that see themselves as high fashion, people that see themselves as service. It's all there, and people have a great choice. And I think that we weren't shabby in the way that we did it. So I'm just proud of how it all is, and the fact that the business is still going. It's doing well.
Yeah. Real credit there. Any final thoughts or messages you want to share with our listeners?
Not really, no. I think that we've covered everything on there, and I just thank you for your time and listen to the story.
Thank you so much for sharing all your insights. Something that you mentioned early on was, whether it was in reference to Equal Health or even to Vision West, it's sort of something that just happened. But, one thing that's clear to me, in our discussions and knowing you for the time that I have, is that you've obviously got that passion for giving and for health and for healthcare, and I think it's a testament to the businesses that you've established and your charitable work. When you sort of draw that full picture, it obviously speaks very highly of yourself and what you've been doing. I think it's great, and you're an inspiration to a lot of people I know. I'm one of them. So
thank you, Michael. That's very kind.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story,
Pleasure.
And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. So thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Focused View, proudly presented by Opticare. It's been our privilege to share the insights and stories that resonate deeply with the eye care community. We hope today's episode has not only inspired you, but also armed you with the practical strategies and innovative ideas to help you enhance your practice and professional journey. If you found value in our conversation, we'd be grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. And share this episode with your colleagues. It helps us reach more eye care professionals like you and grow our community of visionaries. Stay connected by subscribing to The Focused View and visiting our website www.thefocusedview.com.au for additional resources and episode summaries. We look forward to your company again in our next episode. Until then, keep focused. I'm Michael Nasser. Bye for now.